Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Strength and Hormones podcast. Today is another LOdown solo episode, and we're going to be talking about this yummy little yellow substance called bile that you might have heard of before, and its connection to thyroid, cholesterol, Hashimotos, and what you should know about why bile matters and how the thyroid impacts your bile production. So let's first off by just talking about what bile is specifically and how it's made. So bile is made in the liver, and then it is stored in the gallbladder, and from there it's released, and then it goes into your small intestine. Now, its main job is to help you be able to break down and absorb fats that you eat in your diet, and also absorb fat-soluble vitamins. So those are certain vitamins that we need fat in presence to be able to enhance absorption. The easiest way to remember it is ADEC, or vitamins A, D, E, and K1/K2, since we have two different types of vitamin K vitamins there. And so it's also the primary route of cholesterol elimination. So when we think about cholesterol and our liver making primary amounts of cholesterol and not our diet influencing cholesterol production very much. And we've talked about this. I've posted blogs and social media things about it before, so I won't spend too much time talking about that. But bile is really important for how we eliminate cholesterol through our digestive system so that that cholesterol doesn't then build up to where we're exhibiting issues with high cholesterol and such. So plays a really important role in all of those functions. It also plays a really important role in our thyroid hormones, which we're going to really focus on today, and also within detoxification, which then kind of indirectly impacts our thyroid as well. So let's just first start off by talking about the connection between bile and the thyroid specifically. T4 is our what we call inactive form of your thyroid hormone. So it's still really important because you need T4 in order to make the active form of your thyroid hormone, T3. But T4 really doesn't do much for us in terms of how it's regulating speed and different systems in the body. T3 is what we call the metabolically active form. And that's what's actually speeding up digestion and helping with hair growth and nail growth and fertility and pretty much any growth process in the body. But it all starts from T4. And when we don't have enough T4, this actually thickens our bile. And so then when that bile is thick, it doesn't flow as well. And it also slows our bile flow rate. So that means that this bile that should be flowing, think of it as you have a funnel, right? And you've got liquid going through the funnel. That liquid gets really sticky and thick, and it doesn't flow through the funnel as well. And so you can imagine that if we're trying to detoxify different substances, those substances aren't getting detoxified as efficiently because that whole flow rate and system is getting backed up. And so that's actually how our thyroid hormones directly influence bile production and bile flow. It also impacts contractions in our digestive system, and it's those contractions that actually push food through our digestive system. And if we're not having as many contractions in our digestive system, then you can imagine that we're going to have more issues with things like constipation and, bloating and other types of slow motility issues. One of the big hallmark symptoms of hypothyroidism and Hashimotos is slowed motility or constipation and bloating. And it's because one of the reasons why, there's a couple, but one of the main reasons is because of that thickening and slowing of that bile production. There's actually some research that shows that with gallstones specifically, patients that have gallstones have a threefold increased chance of developing hypothyroidism. So not only does your thyroid impact bile, but bile also impacts your thyroid because bile helps convert that inactive, that T4, over to T3. There is a huge hormonal connection as it relates to the gallbladder. And unfortunately, a lot of times when people are dealing with gallbladder issues, you go in, you probably see a surgeon, they say, let's take your gallbladder out. It's not really doing anything for you. It's doing a lot for you. And when you take it out, many people start to deal with more hypothyroid symptoms, more issues with estrogen dominance, more digestive issues. And then they wonder, why am I having so many symptoms and these imbalances? And it all is because of the gallbladder. Now, if you've already had your gallbladder out, you're not doomed. We just need to understand that, okay, we don't have a gallbladder, so we need to support the body a little bit more in this whole bile production situation so that we don't then end up with the hormonal ramifications and the digestive ramifications of not having that gallbladder to be able to help us. We've got to give the liver a little bit more support. Now, when there's too much cholesterol, so we're making a lot of cholesterol and there's not enough bile because maybe this whole thyroid hormone situation is impacting that bile flow, your risk of gallstones increases. And so there's research that shows that the more thyroid hormones you have, the reduced risks of gallstones. So people that have hyperthyroidism typically have a lower risk of gallstones. People that have hypothyroidism typically have a higher risk of gallstones. And you might have heard of before that during pregnancy, that can be a big time where you are more prone to gallbladder issues and gallstones. And that's not necessarily because of the thyroid changes. That's actually due to estrogen. We're not going to really talk too much about estrogen today. We're going to really specifically focus on the thyroid. But if there is a chronically high estrogen state, that can also drive the gallstone formation too. So again, your hormones play a big role in how the gallbladder is functioning. We also need thyroid hormones for our bile ducts to relax. So again, if we don't have adequate levels of T4 and T3, something like hypothyroidism is causing that, then we're not going to be able to relax those bile ducts. We need that to happen to help to be able to create the right flow of bile and make sure that the whole bile process is working efficiently. Now, the gallbladder and bile connection, like I mentioned, also impacts things like toxins. And we've talked about in previous episodes why different toxins that we're exposed to, like heavy metals and mycotoxins from molds and endocrine disruptors, why they impact hormones in general so severely, but why they have an affinity for the thyroid more specifically. So if you're curious to learn more about that, definitely head over to one of those episodes to learn more. But if you've listened to those episodes, you know that it's really important that we're thinking about how our liver is detoxifying and our overall toxin load when we're thinking about the thyroid. About 70% of your T4 gets converted to T3 in the liver. And the liver is where we start the process of converting pretty much any toxin into something that's safe for the body to excrete. So what happens is when you're exposed to a toxin or even hormones like estrogen, they go to the liver. Then from the liver, they go through bile. And then from there, they go to our digestive system and out they come as poop. So bile is like that intermediate step. And so if you don't have enough bile production, that whole process can get backed up, right? Maybe those toxins are going through the liver, but then they're never really making their way through bile and then out into the digestive system. And then when that happens, these toxins can then accumulate in different tissues of our body, mainly the thyroid. The thyroid's very sensitive to these toxins, but they can also accumulate in places like our skin. And that's one of the reasons why you might have heard before that your skin is your largest organ of detoxification. And if your liver isn't functioning optimally, you're probably going to deal with more skin-related issues like acne and eczema and those types of disorders because the whole process of that liver to bile to poop conversion situation isn't working as we want it to. Now, we know that things like not eating enough protein, not getting enough of the antioxidants and B vitamins that are involved in this process, as well as just simple things like too much inflammation can all impact how this process functions. And it's one of the reasons why in our inflammation hormone program, we focus so much on making sure that not only are we supporting bile production and bile flow, and we do that through some of the specific foods, and we're going to talk about some of those today, but also some of the supplements that we incorporate into the program, but also why we focus so much on making sure that we have the nutrients for phases 1, 2, and 3 of detoxification, because we really want to push all these processes at the same time. We don't want to just be thinking about reducing toxin load. We want to be thinking about how are we supporting the liver, how are we supporting bile, all simultaneously to really get the best outcomes for reduced inflammation and overall better hormone production too. So you probably are sold on bile already, but in case you're not, I'm going to give you a few more things that you want to consider about bile. Outside of it just helping with thyroid hormone conversion and also helping with detoxification, it also is like nature's Clorox is how I like to think of it. It has natural antimicrobial actions and it helps to be able to kill things in our gut that shouldn't be there. So say you go to Mexico, you eat tacos that maybe are contaminated with E. coli, and you have adequate bile production. You may not get sick, but someone else that you're with that doesn't have adequate bile production might, because there isn't enough bile there to kill that E. coli, that bacteria that's in the gut. But bile also helps to be able to really keep our microbiome in balance. And so it's been shown that people that don't have good bile production or good bile flow are more at risk for things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, more dysbiosis, we say, within the gut, because you don't have that Clorox on board. So those bacteria are building up. Just like if you didn't, clean your kitchen counters and disinfect, right? Then you would have more bacteria on your counters and you would probably get sick more often. So it's a natural antimicrobial. It also helps eliminate hormones and cholesterol. I mentioned earlier estrogen specifically. Estrogen needs bile for elimination because it goes through the liver primarily. So if you're dealing with something like estrogen dominance or maybe even something like an estrogen sensitive cancer, it's really important that we have adequate bile on board because that's going to help you to be able to keep those estrogen levels in a healthy balance and really get rid of those harmful estrogens. And again, it helps with cholesterol. So if we have enough bile, then we can also help improve our cholesterol metabolism. And a lot of times we see for individuals that they have high cholesterol levels. It's been estimated that people with hypothyroidism, 90% of them have dyslipidemia, which means that there's either high levels of cholesterol, mainly LDL cholesterol, or high levels of triglycerides. And bile can help with this because it's helping to be able to metabolize that cholesterol essentially through our liver and then out as poop. Hypercholesterolemia in hypothyroidism can cause bile to supersaturate in cholesterol, and this itself can lead to reduced motility, depressed contractility. So that basically just means that your gut isn't contracting. We're not getting those digestive contractions like we want to, and the gallbladder not filling as it should. So it's impairing how the gallbladder is filling up with that bile, and this itself can present issues with those gallstones like we talked about. So let's kind of talk about some of the labs that we would typically run in this situation to see if this is potentially an issue, if you don't know it already is for you. And then also some of the natural treatment approaches that we can take to be able to support the body. So first and foremost, there's a couple of just like very standard labs. I don't think these are perfect. A lot of times they're not going to come back elevated unless there's like a very acute issue and you're having a lot of gallbladder related symptoms. Your gallbladder is located on the right-hand side, by the way. So it's one of the big telltale symptoms is after you eat a meal, especially a fatty meal, you notice kind of like a sharp pain in that right rib cage. That can be a sign of gallbladder attack or what we call like gallbladder sludge, which essentially just means that things aren't moving and cleaning out as efficiently. So bilirubin is one lab that can be run that often is run if there's suspicion of this. And we know that excess bilirubin can actually cause gallstones to form. So if that comes back high, you're having gallbladder pain, your doctor's probably going to assume that there's a risk of gallstones that's happening. We also can look at things like AST and ALT. Those are liver enzymes. Again, those will maybe be elevated, but generally more of like an acute type situation. And then one that we probably look at the most often would be what's called steatocrit. And steatocrit is a marker of fat malabsorption that we can pick up on through a comprehensive stool analysis, like a GI map. And that tells us if you're malabsorbing fat, and that can give us really good insight into what's going on with this bile acid production. And then, of course, if you don't have a gallbladder, then we know that you probably need support in that area. Or if you just have hypothyroidism or Hashimotos, and maybe you also have digestive symptoms, or you're having, poor T4 to T3 conversion, that those can be some telltale signs that we should start to support this bile acid production. And as long as we use more, low intervention type options initially, there's generally never any ramifications or like symptoms that you'll experience. But we'll talk about some of the options today and which of those might be better ones to start with versus if you don't know, if you have an issue, what to not jump into. So some of these different options that you can explore, first and foremost, is taurine. Taurine is an amino acid. It's a major constituent of bile, so you need a lot of taurine to be able to make bile, hence why if we're trying to improve our bile flow and bile production, why we might want to consider supplementation with that. There's been research that's shown that it can improve thyroid function in animals that are exposed to toxins. And it's something that you can supplement. Generally, with any singular amino acids, you want to make sure you're not taking them with meals because it can alter how you absorb the proteins and the meals that you eat. So it could be something maybe you explore incorporating on an empty stomach at some point throughout the day. Two of my favorites, or really the next few are my favorites, are ox bile. Ox bile is one. Ox bile is definitely more of a heavy hitter. So if you don't know there's a bile issue going on, I probably wouldn't start with ox bile, or you probably are going to notice some issues with digestive symptoms. People sometimes get like loose stools or yellow stools and things of that sort. But ox bile is basically bile salts that have been taken out of a animal, and you're essentially taking those as a replacement before meals. Kind of think of it as like a digestive enzyme that's helping you to break down the fats in that meal specifically. TUDCA is also a more like natural option. This is a good alternative to ox bile, especially if you are vegan or vegetarian. Some of them are sourced from animals, but they can also be sourced from plants as well. But it is a naturally occurring bile salt, so your body does make it. It's actually a byproduct of taurine. It's one component of taurine, so they're very closely related to one another. And it not only helps to support bile flow, but also just really provides the liver support in general. So it can be a really good option to explore, and we can use it simultaneously by itself. The options are kind of endless in how we incorporate it. And then one of my favorites that I talk about a lot is inositol. Inositol really has so many magical properties to it, and that's why it's the main ingredient in our hormone potion supplement. That hormone potion supplement is 100% myo-inositol. The reason why we went with myo-inositol is because it really is where the most research stands in inositol in general. The research that's been done on its abilities to help with some of the bile things and Hashimoto antibodies and things of that sort have been with myo-inositol specifically. D-chiroinositol is the other form. The research in that has been more specifically with PCOS and helping improve insulin resistance. So they both have their benefits, but I like myo-inositol a bit better just because there's more diverse benefits for more individuals. But outside of even just helping with like insulin sensitivity and reducing thyroid antibodies, it can also be great for the brain and reducing risk of depression, helping with sleep, and then also helping with increasing bile acid secretion. So it's kind of like a one just catch-all wonder supplement, if you will. And it's a natural be-like vitamin. So it's not something synthetic you're taking. It's naturally sourced from foods. You're just giving your body a little bit more of it than what you're probably getting from food sources. So I'll link to the hormone potion supplement below in case you guys want to check that out. Outside of that, sunflower lecithin is also a really great option. You might have heard of sunflower lecithin before as like an additive in food products. There's usually sunflower lecithin or soy lecithin. I definitely recommend the sunflower lecithin over soy lecithin. Anything that's synthetically processed that's soy really is a no-go in my book. So I definitely recommend going the sunflower route. Basically, the benefits of sunflower lecithin is that it's a really rich source of something called phosphatidylcholine. We talked about the benefits of phosphatidylcholine as it relates to the vagus nerve and how the vagus nerve impacts digestion and hormones and inflammation in one of my previous episodes with Dr. Habib. But phosphatidylcholine is important for so many different things. It's especially important for the brain, and it's something that I've actually been supplementing with all throughout pregnancy for that purpose, and also because of the increased risk of gallstones that you have during pregnancy, so helping to prevent that from occurring, which generally you're more prone to in the third trimester. But 22% of your bile is actually made from lecithin, and lecithin helps to kind of thin out your bile. So we can get lecithin from just supplementation of sunflower lecithin. I use it as it's kind of like a jelly-like substance. I add it into my smoothie every morning. You can also buy it as a powder. You can also take it as a capsule. You might have even heard of its role in helping with preventing mastitis when breastfeeding because of how it helps to be able to thin out those fats that are in the early breast milk, because breast milk is definitely more fatty in the early days. So it's really good for helping kind of thin out all fat sources, bile included. And it's needed to produce and release bile, which aids in digestion and absorption of fats. And because it has all that phosphatidylcholine component in it, this helps to be able to support just a healthy bile composition. And again, it's just like a very easy, pretty cheap and affordable way to be able to get those benefits. Now, in terms of food sources, these are really easy ones to incorporate that I would say start with before even any of these supplements. I probably should have talked about these even before we got into the supplements, but I know supplements are always just like an easy thing to gravitate towards first and foremost. But firstly, anything that's bitter is going to be excellent for supporting bile flow. So in traditional cultures, they typically would actually consume something bitter before they started eating to be able to stimulate not just bile, but also all digestive enzyme production. And this could be something like arugula, it could be lemon, especially the rind of lemon, apple cider vinegar, dandelion, garlic. Really think of anything that's bitter. I really love grapefruit for this as well. Those are great ways to be able to actually stimulate the bitter receptors in your mouth. And when you stimulate those bitter receptors in your mouth, it's sending chemical messaging down to your gut to start releasing bile and digestive enzymes. So, as soon as you start smelling food, all of these processes begin. Your body's like, okay, I know that I'm probably about to eat. I'm going to start making more of these digestive juices. But then when we stimulate those bitter receptors, it actually just helps enhance that process further. So, a really great natural solution to digestive enzyme supplements. Also, a really great way to help you absorb more of the nutrients from the food you eat and make it a little bit more bile friendly. I utilize these bitter foods a lot of times when I eat, but especially when I eat things like red meat or raw vegetables, things that are a little bit harder in your digestion. With something like red meat, especially if you're eating like a ribeye, it's going to be pretty fatty and it might cause you to not feel as well, especially if you don't have great bile flow. So this could be a great opportunity to maybe incorporate some of those bitter foods, and that could look like something as simple as doing an arugula salad as a starter, or I love to make a little bitter cocktail and do more like a mocktail than a cocktail, but basically has like apple cider vinegar, a little splash of grapefruit, and then sparkling water in it. So it's really up to you. Just make sure that once you consume those bitter foods, that we're not then diluting it with tons and tons of flat water, because then you kind of are canceling out all the good work that you just did. So a couple ounces of water here or there throughout the meal are fine, but we really want to make sure that we're stimulating those bitter receptors and we're kind of keeping them stimulated throughout. Beets are also a really great option and can be really great, especially if you actually have active gallstones. But they are one of the richest sources of betaine, and you might have heard of betaine before. Betaine helps to be able to stimulate stomach acid production, and it is a natural bile thinner and also a natural liver detoxifier. So it can help to be able to break up gallstones. You do need to consume quite a bit of beets, but I love beets for so many other purposes. They're also a really great source of nitrates, and nitrates help increase vasodilation, which means that your blood can flow more easily. So they can be a really great pre-workout option. Tons of research to show the benefits to athletic performance, both endurance as well as strength, when you're consuming beets prior to exercise. You do need to consume them about 60 minutes prior in order for them to be elevated in the bloodstream, so keep that in mind. But they're also great for helping with the bile support. They're great for helping with implantation if you're trying to get pregnant, because you need really good blood flow for that. They're great for, anything that's supporting blood flow is great for hormones, because we need blood in order for hormones to be transmitted throughout the body. So they're a really great option for a lot of reasons. And you can either do whole beets, you can do like a beet juice concentrate. There's a lot of companies that sell them as little shots that you can incorporate, or you can even make like a fresh pressed beet juice and incorporate that into like a smoothie as a base. I think that it pairs really nicely with doing like a frozen berry alongside of it. And it helps to be able to also give you all those benefits. You do want to make sure that if you're trying to get the nitrate specific benefits, not specifically the gallbladder benefits, but more specifically if you're trying to get the gallbladder plus the nitrate benefits, that you aren't using any alcohol-based oral care products, because again, it all goes back to the mouth, and that all of those nitrates are actually converted through salivary enzymes. So your saliva is actually what converts those beets that you consume over to nitrates. And if you're using alcohol-based mouth rinses or really abrasive toothpaste and things, you're actually killing some of those good bacteria and enzymes that are helping with that conversion process. So it's best to avoid using any of those. I have an episode on the toothpaste I use and why I love all of their oral care products. But those would be an option that you could do if you are looking for a replacement option that doesn't have any of those alcohol-based components that are going to kill those enzymes. So I know I threw a lot of ideas at you today, but like I said, start with some of the things that are going to be a little bit easier to incorporate, that aren't going to cause any potential side effects. I always would start with the food as medicine options first and integrate those into your daily routine. And then, like I said, probably leaving more of the heavy hitter things like ox bile and TUDCA towards the end. Maybe once you've incorporated things like beets and such, then you move into sunflower lecithin. It's always great to get testing so that you know exactly what's going on, but I understand that maybe we're not always ready for that, or financially it doesn't always make sense. And so I want to provide you with some options of how you can start to naturally support bile production to be able to ultimately improve not even just digestion, but also your cholesterol levels, your thyroid hormone levels. Remember that bile is needed to convert that T4 over to T3 and to detoxify things that slow down our thyroid function. if you're not sure where to start or how to incorporate these things, how much, how to make them taste good, and you want to really just learn more about why this all matters and all the other components that go into it, that would be where I would recommend our program, Inflammation Harmony. Inside that program, we talk about all of the different things that are influencing your thyroid hormone production, sex hormone production, and all of the different components that you can incorporate within diet, lifestyle, as well as supplementation. And we spell it out for you super easily and a really easy to follow protocol. So it's very easy to know exactly what to do, what not to do. I wanted to make it so that it wasn't adding more work on you. I understand that you probably don't have time to do like a course to learn about this stuff, nor maybe do you want to. And so I try to make it as easy for you to just follow within your day-to-day life. And then there's also podcast episodes that are ones that are not published on this channel, private podcast channel. So you can actually learn more about some of these topics and why we recommend the things that we do in the protocol. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We'll see you back next week for another episode.